Brilliant. So we'll get started. Thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon on what has been a really interesting day full of security if you've joined any of our previous webinars today. So just so you guys know, my name's Chloe Mustafa. I work as a Cobweb marketing manager here, and I'm joined by Aidan from MineCast, who is a sales engineer. And we're going to be delving into a little bit deeper into web security and some of the topics that were already explored in this morning's webinar about all the security risks that are going on in this day and age. Some of you might be familiar with MineCast from its email security point of view. This is a different product that they have, which looks at web security in a much deeper and more sort of detailed and technical way. So Aidan, it's lovely for you to join us and just take it away.
Amazing. Thanks very much, Chloe. Well, firstly, good afternoon, everyone. As Chloe mentioned, my name's Aidan Blackwood, and I'm one of the sales engineers here at MineCast. So a lot of my role consists of talking to customers, existing customers, of what their threat landscape looks like. And mostly that's done via email, trying to stop bad things from getting into your network via attachments, viruses, or malicious content that you see in impersonation attacks. But it's 2020, and another attack surface that we need to focus on is web security, especially because of the nature of current affairs and what's going on with the pandemic for COVID-19. So we're going to jump straight into it, and we'll start by talking about some of the threats that have existed before COVID-19, and namely we're going to focus on web security. So on screen here, I've got an example of a web page. Nothing looks unusual of the fact that I've gone ahead and highlighted that the characters that you can see in Apple are actually Cyrillic characters, so characters that you see in the Russian alphabet. So the question is, why is that a problem? Well, it does look like apple.com at a glance, but this isn't a legitimate domain. And what I mean by that is the A, the PP, and the LE that you see in the domain themselves aren't from the normal alphabet that we're used to seeing. And this is a common attack that cyber criminals are using to exploit users. One of the other things that we need to focus on is the padlock that we're trained to look out for. If you see the green padlock on a web browser, it indicates that the site is legitimate and the traffic is encrypted. But attackers are also exploiting this now, and they're creating these websites that, one, use non-Western characters, and two, have that HTTPS traffic encrypted. So the main point to note here that it's very, very difficult to spot a legitimate domain from one that's malicious. So we'll delve into this in a bit more detail, and we'll talk about a couple of other examples. So we've got adidas.de, as you can see on screen here, and the examples that I've got on screen are ones that are experiencing quite high traffic at the moment, mainly because people are working from home. So a good example of this would be Adidas. People are looking for ways to stay fit, remain healthy, so they're browsing websites to order new fitness gear. The problem with this, again, is the attack that I just showed you in the previous screen. The characters look very similar to the ones that we see every day, but if you look closely, you can actually see that the I in Adidas is missing the dot. And attackers have done this in a very, very clever way. So there's something called Punycode. In essence, there's characters in alphabets such as the Greek alphabet or Arabic that have characters that we're not used to seeing day to day. And the problem with that is websites couldn't support those characters, the accents above A's and the accents above E's. So there's a framework that's been developed called Punycode, and in the back end, when people are registering websites, it gives them this string of text that renders correctly when you're using it on a web browser. And that's fantastic because it means that organizations can have localized and globalized content for different language sets. But of course, attackers have found that as a way to exploit end users. So let's delve into a couple more examples. We've got google.com, of course, that experiences high traffic every day. And if you look closely, you can see the L. Above the L in google.com, there's actually an accent on there. So again, people are going away and they're finding characters that look very similar to legitimate characters that we see all the time and using that to create copycat domains. Another example, ikea.com, people are working from home and they're using this as a great time to go ahead and renovate their working space to make sure they're comfortable. So ikea.com is experiencing much more legitimate traffic. Again, if we look closely, we can see the K in IKEA.com has an accent above it and isn't the legitimate domain. And the final one speaks for itself, Waitrose, because of social distancing and making sure that you are remaining isolated and in quarantine. People are doing much more online grocery shopping. So Waitrose and sites similar to Waitrose are experiencing much more traffic. If we look closer, we can see that the I in Waitrose is missing a dot. So why does this stuff matter and why is this important? Well, we need to think about the fact that these web attacks existed before COVID-19. And if people are going away and finding character sets that look legitimate to trick out end users, they can bank on the idea that COVID-19 is a pandemic at the moment and there is a lot of public fear and anxiety, and use that to exploit users in more sophisticated ways. So we'll delve into a couple more examples. So our threat intel team actually found that there were 500 plus suspicious domains around the 1st of April that were impersonating Netflix.com, and that speaks for itself. Now is a great time to fill the extra time that you have at home, catch up on a couple of box sets, and really just be a bit more leisurely and separate your space. Most people are confined in the same work environment, so we need to find new ways to entertain ourselves. And Netflix was popular way before COVID-19, but there's a surplus in traffic in that. 500 alone is quite a significant number if we think about attacks that are being sent to end users. The other side of this is other sites that we need to bear in mind. So we have Disney Plus, Amazon Prime, and also YouTube. So these are common sites that people visit every single day. So if we jump into what this looks like and how we bring this all together and what we need to focus on. We've seen attackers actually send emails to end users masquerading as sites that are providing a cure for COVID-19. And again, a lot of this stuff is banking on current affairs, attack vectors that exist, such as puny code or non-Western characters, and then an emotional response from end users. People that are generous may choose to donate to people that are victims of COVID-19 and are currently hospitalized for that, really using the greater good to try and exploit end users. The other side of it is legitimate sites such as WHO. If you receive an email that looks like it's coming from WHO, but provides a link to a website that isn't legitimate and impersonates a real one, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to spot that's a dangerous attack. So how do we go about fixing this, and how do we approach spotting ways to look out for some of these attack surfaces, things like puny code or things like characters from the Greek alphabet? Well, we'll start by talking about MineCast Web Security. So this is a solution that's actually leveraged the threat intel that we've developed over the last 10 to 15 years for email specifically. MineCast has a lot of knowledge and insight into what makes a domain good or bad. And that's from the email security suite that we've had, analyzing inbound emails that come in and deciding whether they're malicious or not, depending on a number of indicators. So we decided to plug the gap and build a solution that not only protects your end users inside the office, but also when they're working remotely. Again, now is a prime time where people are working from home. So how do we make sure that those machines and their mobile phones have the right level of protection to look out for some of these sophisticated attacks that I showed you in these examples? So let's talk about how it works. There's ultimately two ways that we can deploy MineCast Web Security. The first one, more traditional, is when your end user are actually in the office. It requires them to be connected to their internet office web security point. And the way this works is by analyzing all of the requests that you make to go to certain websites. So an example of this would be going to americanexpress.com. There's a couple of things we'll check to make sure that American Express domain is legitimate. One, analyzing the characters, and two, checking if this domain is newly registered. A good way that attackers exploit end users is by creating new websites that pop up overnight that have a very low digital footprint, that bank on users going onto these websites, maybe entering credentials, and then they take the site down and do their damage and it disappears from the internet. And a good indication of whether a site is legitimate or not is how long it's existed. How long has that website been live? If we see that website's been live for a week or so, it's really questionable. We need to think about Waitrose.com as an example. If you're going to visit Waitrose.com and you saw that this site only existed for less than a week, it would be questionable given the size of the brand. So those are the types of things we're analyzing. But this requires you to be connected to your internet office connection. What about everyone else that's working at home? So the second option is deployment method 2, which we call the MineCast Security Agent. If you're using a Windows machine, like most of us are, or a handful of us users that are using Mac machines, we've actually got ways of deploying a very small piece of software that is installed system level on your PC. And what does that do? Well, when you're going to visit a website, this software will analyze where you're going and decide whether that's a dangerous website. It could be from the characters in the website, how long that website has existed, or it could extend to something known as category filtering. So there are many organizations that use something such as an acceptable use policy, defining whether their end users can access maybe social media or block access to adult related content. Those are the number of checks that we're going to perform. So if we delve into this a bit deeper, it goes beyond just looking at dangerous websites. It could be the acceptable use policies, or it could be some other things. So a good example of this would be a standard block or allow list. Your IT team may define what types of websites they want your end users to access, on top of having protection against websites that, to the naked eye, you may not be able to pick up. Other things that are in there are something we call targeted threat protection managed domains. So for anyone that's currently on the webinar that uses the MineCast email security product, they'll be familiar with something called URL Protect. And this is designed to rewrite and scan any inbound links you receive on an email, ultimately building up a list of domains that are good and bad. Well, the great thing about this is if you're an email security user and a web security user, that intel and that data can speak to each other. So if you receive an email from joeblogs@baddomain.com and you decide to block that, if you try to go to baddomain.com on a web browser, that will be blocked too automatically because of that two-way feed of the communication that you've got there. Some of the other things that we have is something we call application control, and this will give you visibility of cloud services and cloud applications that you may visit on a daily basis. A good example of this would be OneDrive or Google Drive, Dropbox as an example. Some of those websites present a risk to organizations when it comes to data breaches. So there may be certain controls that you want to have with those certain domains. And of course, domains such as Dropbox and WeTransfer can be impersonated by some of the attacks that we spoke about earlier on. So some of the questions we have to ask ourselves is, how do we verify that a domain that we're visiting is legitimate? For the naked eye, that can be very, very difficult depending on how technically savvy you are, or you could be very, very busy. It could be a day where you're working back to back and you're on Zoom calls, and you may suffer from something we call decision fatigue, where you've been very, very busy, you've been burnt out, and you almost go into a state of autopilot, which means that some of those nuances that you see in character sets, the accents above eyes or eyes missing dots, can easily be missed. So it makes sense to have another control that can read that data and block or allow access to a page depending on that. So that's essentially how it works. What we're going to do now is open up the chat for any initial questions. We wanted to keep it lightweight and nice and easy. So the microphone is over to you. Are there any particular questions that you have in mind? That could be from the attacks we've spoken about, maybe some things you read in the news, or even how you'd get this configured and rolled out.
I'd just like to add on to that, if anyone doesn't feel particularly comfortable or happy going over the voice functionality to ask their questions, please feel free to use the chat box functionality as well, which for those of you that are new to Teams, it's just if you move your mouse, you'll be able to see a show conversation button. It looks like a little speech bubble. If you just click on that, that will open up the chat box for any questions for you to type in.
Okay, so it doesn't look like we have any questions yet, but just to kind of summarize on some of the points that we spoke about today, a lot of organizations do put a lot of their efforts and resources into blocking email-based attacks, which of course is the right thing to do. But another attack surface that we also need to think about is web, and that could be in the office, it could be working from home, it could also be your mobile phone. So we need to, one, focus on awareness of what these attacks look like. So your end users have enough insight when something is suspicious and what they should do. The second part of that is having technical controls in place that can be there for a fail-safe, that can pick up on some of the nuances that attackers are using to exploit users. I think the most prevalent thing we need to focus on at the moment is COVID-19 and the state of the pandemic being exploited by attackers. So certainly if you are working from home and you're on your machine and you're not aware if you have the right technical controls in place, I'd certainly suggest reaching out to Cobweb, speaking to Chloe and getting a bit more insight.
Aidan, what would be really useful from my point of view is to understand why, if I'm an email security customer with MineCast, why there's actually additional value in also looking at web services. The interconnectedness of those two very different but still very related threat risks would be useful to hear about.
Absolutely, it's a really good point. So for the existing customers that have built up a database of the good and bad domains that the targeted threat protection suite has been analyzing, that's fantastic because a lot of that hard work is already done. MineCast has good visibility of who you're messaging and what those attacks look like. There could be attacks where you're receiving lots of impersonation attacks, people mimicking your supply chain, pretending to be brands that you work with or suppliers that you work with. And the email security stack has given you protection against that. It's blocked certain senders that may have the same first and last name as employees that you work with. The target threat protection suite could have also blocked domains that look very similar to your own, again, using those attack surfaces that we spoke about. So when you go ahead and you deploy MineCast Web Security, it immediately plugs into that and the policies will feed that information through. So should you try to visit a website that is dangerous, that looks very, very legitimate, and you're unaware of what makes it different or dangerous or bad, that web security suite already has that backend intel that we've received from email and has already done the hard work for you. So it's certainly beneficial to have both of those different products speaking to each other when it comes down to the administration of the product.
Thanks, that is really useful. And Aidan, just a couple of slides back, I think you talked through a list of 7 or 8, if this is it, yeah. I think there's eight different things and eight different indicators that the W1 service will look at. Now, it may well just be my ignorance, but it'd be really useful if you could just cycle back through those with some really kind of obvious use cases for each of these 8 different things. Just for anybody on the call that isn't used to the language that we're using here, which is fairly technical.
Yeah, absolutely. So on screen, what you've got here is in the orange box, you've got something that we call the security policy. So they're the number of controls that we have when MineCast is analyzing web traffic. So to simplify, what we can see at the top of the list is something we call exceptions. So these may be resources or websites that you certainly need to access and don't require any level of scanning. And this is a control that your admins will put in. The second on the list is domain block or allow lists. Very, very simple. Do you want to green light or blacklist access to a certain website? Again, this is a control that your administrators would put in place. Third on the list is the TTP managed domains, and that's the integration between the MineCast Web Security product and the email security product. Number 4 is your newly observed domains. So checking if that domain has existed for less than a week or so. And to recap on why this is important, websites that have only existed a week have a very, very low digital footprint, meaning that they won't exist in a blacklist in the industry. And what we often do when we grant access to a website for an end user is check if that website exists on the blacklist. If it's on the blacklist, it's an indication that it's been used for a malicious attack. Maybe that could be credential harvesting, where it's a copycat domain of something like Office 365, prompts you to put in your username and password, but in fact is actually a copycat of that domain and your credentials are stolen. So that's the kind of things we're looking out for. If it's quite new, it's an indication that it's flying under the radar and we want to treat it as suspicious. Number 5 is application and cloud visibility. This simply analyzes websites such as Google Drive, WeTransfer, or Dropbox. sites that could present a risk to data leaks if you upload files to those websites. And you certainly want to make sure those websites are legitimate and not spoof or impersonations of the real one. Number 6 is category filtering. Very simple. This is defining access to certain websites in bulk. So that could be bulk policies against things like social media, adult-related content, news sites, and maybe even web-based email. 7 is similar domains. So that's checking if there's characters that look similar to legitimate ones, or a good example of this would be MineCast.com, but an attacker going away and registering MineCast with a 1 replacing the I in the word mime. A good example for that. So it uses a simple technique to see if there's any similarities in that domain. And then number 8 is the ability to scan downloads from websites that we see as uncategorized. They don't have a category yet. They're too newly observed. And if there are reasons for you to legitimately download files from this website, we want to make sure those files are clean before they're installed on your machine. Super. So that wraps up the policies and also the way MineCast actually handles its inspection. We'll leave the last couple of minutes for any questions that may have popped up on the last bits that we covered.
Brilliant, thank you, Aidan. Just for those that are on the call, we will be sending this recording out alongside all the other recordings from today's security webinars that we've done. That will probably be landed in your inboxes safely, I should say, tomorrow morning. And part of that as well, we do have a offer running at the moment, which enables you to take advantage of the sort of solutions, including the web security one that you've seen today, free for 90 days as part of, us trying to ensure that our customers can maintain business functionality during remote working. So if that's something that you are interested in, you'll find out more information about that in your inbox tomorrow. But if you can't wait until then, please reach out to your account manager to find out more. But if we don't have any more questions, I'd like to just say thank you to Aidan and obviously David as well for sort of being a part of today and being a part of our security day here with Cobweb.
Amazing. Thanks, Chloe, and thanks, Aidan.
Thanks, Chloe. Thanks for having us.
No worries, guys. I think if anyone's not got any more questions, I think that'll be it. So enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you've got a bit of sunshine where you are, just like I have outside right now. So cool. Thank you, guys. Bye.